Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello, and thanks so much for joining us here for episode 878 with Vanessa Patrick. If you have ever had the experience of being reluctant to say no, saying yes to something you really didn't want to do, then being upset that you did and frustrated and annoyed and resentful and all that stuff, Vanessa has got the goods to help you say no well, preserve the relationship, and so much good stuff. So you'll learn 1, the 3 competencies of an empowered refusal. 2, what to do if someone's being pushy. And 3, why it's actually better for your reputation to say no. So if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please visit us over at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP878. And while you're there, check out some of our great stuff, such as the Gold Nugget email list, which gives you a summary write-up of the actionable takeaway wisdom bits each of our guests have shared, aka a gold nugget, if you will. We send those to your email right when the episode goes out. And when you subscribe, you also unlock access to this archive of 878 of these gold nuggets over at awesomeatyourjob.com. Now, here's a little bit about Vanessa. Vanessa Patrick, PhD, is the Associate Dean for Research, the Bauer Professor of Marketing, and lead faculty of the Executive Women in Leadership Program at the Bauer School of Business at the University of Houston. She has a PhD in business from the University of Southern California, Los Angeles, and she's the author of The Power of Saying No, the new science of how to say no that puts you in charge of your life. Big thanks to Vanessa for sharing her wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Storyworth. Whenever I'm thinking about meaningful Father's Day gifts, Storyworth leaps to mind. Storyworth helps you preserve precious memories and stories from your father for years to come. Each week, Storyworth emails your loved ones a thought-provoking question that you get to help pick, such as, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? I personally love the prompt so much that I have refreshed Storyworth's questions page many times looking for more. Storyworth makes the writing process super quick and easy. All your loved one needs to do is respond to that email with a story, and then you get a quick copy of that. And after a year of this fun, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories and photos into a beautiful keepsake hardcover book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. Families love Storyworth so much, they've got 25,000 5-star reviews on Trustpilot and have millions of stories preserved. So give all the fathers in your life a unique, heartfelt gift they'll all cherish for years. Storyworth. Right now, you can save $10 on your first purchase when you go to storyworth.com/awesome. That's storyworth.com/awesome to save $10 on your first purchase. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. And big thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. NerdWallet.com, whom I love on these sorts of matters, gives Acorns a whopping 4.7 stars and says, quote, if you want to make the most of your spare change, there's no better place to do that than Acorns. Head to acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And we got a legal disclaimer here. It may not be representative of all clients. Tier 1 compensation provided. Compensation provides an incentive to positively promote Acorns. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns' fees before investing. Acorns Advisors LLC, Acorns, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com. Now, here's Vanessa. Vanessa, welcome to How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
Hey, Pete. Lovely to be here.
I'm so excited to dig into your book, The Power of Saying No, the new science of how to say no that puts you in charge of your life. This has been a challenge that many of our listeners have faced. So I think this was going to be so cool to get into it. But first, I wanted to start with, is there a particularly memorable no story you could share with us to kick things off?
Well, it all began when I spent my 24th birthday staring at a fax machine. And it was a memorable day because I spent the evening at the office waiting for a fax. It wasn't even an important fax. It was just a fax which said that the client had received a fax that we had sent earlier.
Okay.
And I spent the whole evening waiting for the fax because my boss told me to do so. And it was a moment where I realized that we very often in working life get stuck doing very trivial things, pretty meaningless things, some of the time that we could easily say no to. And that moment made me realize the importance of learning to say no when the situation merits it.
All right. Well, tell me, how late was it when you left?
So I wanted to leave at 5 o'clock. It was a Tuesday. The fax arrived at 9:30 in the evening. And so I basically spent 4.5 hours just staring at a fax machine, waiting for that white paper to spew out of the machine. And all that white paper said when it arrived was received with thanks.
Okay.
And I remember my 24th birthday and that crinkly white paper so distinctly because it was so trivial. And Pete, if I had to redo this all over again, if I was the me now, when I was 24, I would have negotiated that ask. I would have said something like, can I come early tomorrow morning and pick up the fax and put it on your desk? Or can I ask a friend to please stay back and do it if it was that important? It didn't have to be me, and I did not have to spend my time doing that, and yet I did.
Wait, I'm sorry. You said you were 24 years old, and then you said birthday. This was, in fact, your 24th birthday?
And I missed the birthday party.
Oh, my goodness.
It was quite sad.
Yeah.
I've recovered, not to worry.
Well, but it is definitely seared. That you can tell that memory is really seared into you because you remembered it's a Tuesday and the exact text of the fax and the time that it arrived. These are some details.
Yes, because when you're sitting over there for 4.5 hours, knowing that everyone in your house is having a party, people are coming and going, people are eating dinner, they're leaving, you think about these things and you realize, why am I doing this? Is this worth it? Right? And those are the feelings that we need to kind of capture and memorize so that we don't make those same mistakes again. So I talk about in the book the importance of learning from our mistakes and the fact that when we say yes, when we want to say no, we sometimes have to pause and actually let ourselves feel bad about that. Because we naturally, as human beings, have this coping mechanism, something called the psychological immune system, which jumps in as soon as we feel bad and tries to repair the situation, trying to find a silver lining, trying to look for something good out of that bad situation. And that is why we don't learn very well from bad situations. So we need to stop, embrace that horrible feeling so that we learn from it. So the next time we're in that situation, we can manage it a little bit better.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is because of the drama of this particular instance, like this as a task that is so trivial. I don't know, maybe there's lives on the line associated with this fact.
There were not.
Okay, there weren't. All right. So it's super trivial and it's a 4.5 unnecessary hours in which you're not actively engaged and you're missing out on something really cool, all really come together. So in a weird way, I like the notion of the psychological immune system. This was kind of a blessing because you had an epiphany that I believe has served you well over the subsequent years. And now you're enriching many thousands with this work. So indirectly, I guess we can thank that boss for this
Yes.
request.
Yes, I do think that it did to kind of change the trajectory of my life. You start questioning. It was my first job. You start questioning, is this the kind of job that I want? Is there something more meaningful and important I could do? And also, the curiosity about why people do this. Why do people behave in certain ways, which has shaped my career as a consumer psychologist.
Mm-hmm. And for many of us, when we say yes, when we should have said no, the pain we experience is more minor. It may not be enough for us to really rewind, evaluate, and make some changes.
But we do feel resentful very often. A lot of the people in my studies often talk about the fact that they've said yes when they want to say no, and they feel very resentful towards the other person and really wish they did not do that. But we also search for reasons as to why we said yes and come up with the fact that it might be a growth opportunity. It could open doors. It could lead to a promotion. So we make up these things to make ourselves feel better. But sometimes we need to just see it for what it is and not make the mistake again.
Yeah, that's interesting how we resent them, even though I guess we've got at least 50% responsibility as to having said yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you've done a lot of studies. You've engaged with a lot of people here. Any particularly surprising, fascinating, counterintuitive discoveries you've made here when it comes to us humans and our relationship to saying no?
Yes, it's no surprise that, of course, human beings have trouble saying no. But one of the things that comes out consistently in my research is the fact that no is a gendered issue, that women struggle way more to say no than men do. Women are more likely to say yes to a workplace request than men are. Women are more likely to be asked to do unpromotable work or unpaid work or the office housework, but they're also more likely to take those things on. One of the most interesting things in my studies is something that I call the spotlight effect. And the spotlight effect is this feeling of being in the spotlight when someone makes an ask of you. So in a study, I put people in different conditions. In one condition, I told them that they were asked to do something that they didn't want to do, and there was a crowd of people who had already agreed to do it. And based on the research of social psychology, we know that we are more likely to conform to that ask. The spotlight is going to shine way more brightly on us when we know that other people are watching and expecting us to say yes. So, of course, both men and women are more likely to say yes when there are lots of people watching, even if they want to say no. I also do another scenario where that request is an interpersonal request. There's no crowd. It's just one person versus another person. So the asker and the askee. And in that situation, you find that men are significantly more likely to say, no, this is not going to work if it's a one-on-one. Mm-hmm. But women still respond at the same level as if there was a crowd watching. So women, it's almost like women conjure up this imaginary crowd that is watching them, and the spotlight shines brightly on them, whether it's a one-on-one interaction or whether it's a group. I personally think that's a super interesting finding, and it's fascinating to think about why that is and why women feel that pressure to say yes, feel more intense spotlight, regardless of whether it's a one-on-one ask or it's a crowd.
And can you share with us a rough sense of these figures here, the crowd effect versus the one-on-one effect that is at stake here? Like, is it a smidgen more pressure and probability of saying yes, or is it like double, triple, quadruple?
So when it was a social ask and when both men and women responded equivalently. So about 5 on a scale of 1 to 7.
Okay.
Right? On how much attention did you feel was on you. That drops to 4 for men, which is significantly different, statistically significantly lower compared to women who remain at around a 4.5.
Oh, gotcha. And I guess I'm curious about the percentage of times said yes and didn't want to.
The number of times they said yes.
Yeah.
So we don't have that. In the experiment, we didn't look at that. The scenario required everyone to say yes
Okay.
or no.
Gotcha.
So everyone wanted to say no. It was a clear scenario where no one wanted to do it.
Can you get what's our scenario?
Yeah, so it was something like spending your spring break doing some volunteer work for a friend who just caught you. So it was the first day of spring break and someone pulled you aside and said, no, you need to help me with this volunteer work and spend your entire spring break doing this, making calls on my behalf, which is something we pre-tested no one wanted to do.
Okay.
No one wanted to spend their spring break doing.
That's right. Yeah, it would have to be some pretty meaningfully interesting, powerful calls. It's hard to dream up the scenario where that would be a win. Like, oh yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. So there we have it. Interesting tidbits there. So then overall, what would you say is sort of the main thesis or big idea behind the book, The Power of Saying No?
A lot of people, successful people, and in general, most people know that it's a good thing to say no to the things that you don't want to do. The question is how. So the big idea behind the book is the way in which you communicate your refusal, and something called empowered refusal, which is the basis of my research. Empowered refusal is a super skill of being able to say no in a way that's effective. And what effective essentially means is that you are able to communicate a no response while maintaining your relationship with the other person and securing your reputation.
It sounds perfect.
It does.
How do we do that?
So I talk about the fact that you need to develop 3 competencies to develop the skill of empowered refusal. But essentially, empowered refusal requires you to say no by looking inwards. You need to say no by giving voice to your values, priorities, preferences, and beliefs. So it's a no that stems from your identity. And when you say no that stems from your identity, giving voice to what you believe, the way you believe things should be, people are less likely to give you pushback and more likely to be persuaded by your no.
Well, tell us, what are the 3 competencies and how do we develop them?
Right. So the 3 competencies I call the art of empowered refusal, ART: awareness, rules, not decisions, and totality of self. So your empowered refusal begins with self-awareness. It begins with you looking inwards and developing a sense of what you uniquely bring to the table, what you care about, what do you value, how do you want to find meaning in your life. So an awareness of your preferences, your beliefs, your values forms the foundation of step number 2, which is setting up a system of rules and not having to make decisions all the time. So once you understand yourself, then you can set yourself up with a set of personal policies or simple rules that guide your actions and decisions. So if you have rules in place or policies in place, it's much easier for you to say no because you already have a very firm stance on what you believe and how you want things to be. And the final piece of the puzzle is the way you communicate your empowered refusal, which is using your whole self, using not only your language, but also your nonverbal cues. Nonverbal cues that both convey empowerment, but also secure your relationship with the other person. So I can give you a few examples.
Okay.
Let's imagine that someone asks you to fly somewhere unprepared, unannounced. You got to fly over the weekend to do something that is not part of your job. And you don't want to do it because you do not work on weekends, or weekends are family time as far as you're concerned, right? So you have a personal policy in place about how you'd like to spend your weekends, and you are able to better communicate your refusal based on that stance. What usually happens when people ask you for something that you want to say no to is that we grasp for the first available excuse. And excuses are much less effective than policies. Policies reflect a long-standing stance which stem from something that's important to you, something that you value. And when you use a policy, you are more likely to get compliance than if you use an excuse.
Interesting. You say compliance, as in the requester just overrides you.
No, the requester will either push back or they will respect your refusal. Those are the two main options when someone says. So when someone asks you something, they typically expect a yes. It is societally expected that an invitation, an ask, a favor is going to garner a yes response. There's a ton of research that shows that we say yes to the most ridiculous requests because we are socialized and hardwired to help. We are conditioned to be cooperative. We are psychologically poised in many ways to say yes than to say no. And because of that psychological makeup and that socialization, when we say no, we often get pushback from the asker.
Yeah, that's intriguing on so many levels. One, I'm thinking that's kind of absurd that's in us humans. Two, I'm thinking, I guess there's probably a set of contexts that make that true versus not true. So the majority of my emails are pitches from publicists and authors, et cetera, to want to be on my podcast, maybe the plurality of emails. And so I would imagine they don't really expect that I will say yes, because in their own experience of any sort of recruiting, sales, business development activity, the majority of people say no. And I find it a little funny when they say, I'm just making sure you got my email. Like, it's the weirdest thing that you didn't reply. It's like, in some ways, I find that a little bit irksome because it seems to be like almost dishonesty there. It's like, you don't really expect a response. And of course you would like one. And so I guess that's what I'm thinking is like in the context of a stranger who's asking hundreds or thousands of people the same thing via an impersonal platform, email, I don't imagine they expect a yes, but are you telling me maybe they really do?
You hit the nail on the head in terms of the impersonal platform. So we are 34 times more likely to say yes to a face-to-face request.
34.
So email is actually the best way to say no to people because it's impersonal, as you just mentioned, and then you take away that face-to-face concern. I also think that if you think about the studies that people have done, like Vanessa Patrick, for example, she has ask people to do the craziest things. Defile library books. Can I play in your backyard? Can you mail this for me? Completely crazy things. And she finds that people are much more likely to say yes, even to those completely ridiculous requests, than say no. And there's a lot of evidence out there that people do struggle with saying no. And so it's just easier to say yes. And so I talk about it in terms of the fact that society favors the asker. So if you're the asker, you get to ask, and then everybody feels really terrible about saying no. But we have to remember that an ask is just an ask. We don't have to say yes to every ask that comes our way. And for a lot of people, they struggle with that.
34 times. Well, and now I'm intrigued. Do we know where phone calls stack up? Because in a way, it's live in real time, but there's not a face. So I imagine it'd be in the middle. Do you have the numbers on that?
No, I do not. But I imagine that it is somewhere in between the face-to-face and the email. But I think because it's technology mediated, it becomes easier to say no even on a phone call compared to a face-to-face request.
Okay. That's powerful right there. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that I mention is the importance of putting technology in between you and the asker when it becomes a very difficult ask or when you're dealing with a very pushy asker. Convert the conversation to a digital medium or put some technology between you. It's easier to text, it's easier to phone call or convert it to an email than to handle people face to face.
You know, I'm reminded of, I've got a buddy who's a priest. He tells me that after church, there's crowds of people and, you know, they shake hands, they say hello. And that's a good way for people to have a little bit of a, you know, relationship exchange, community building there. And he said that he was inundated with requests like, oh, we should come over, have dinner. We should, you know, hang out in this way or that way. And he used to say sort of yes all the time immediately and schedule. He's like, oh my gosh, my calendar is out of control. And so he decided his new policy was when they make an invitation, assuming he doesn't want to immediately absolutely do it, he says, that sounds great. Please call the office on Monday and talk to Deborah or whomever, and she owns my calendar and she'll find a good time for us.
Yes.
And they said invariably, like way over 90%, he told me, of the incoming requests just disappear, because it's quite a difference to say, hey, I had this fun idea. Why the heck not? Versus, okay, I'm going to actually have to remember to put into my calendar to call a secretary or administrative assistant and get that sorted out. So I thought that was brilliant, and that you're continuing to show interest and it's not blowing them off.
I think your priest friend has got two principles right in the book that I talk about in the book. Never say yes in the moment, like always buy time. And second is, if you have the opportunity to delegate to someone, then that person says no on your behalf, it's a win.
Mm-hmm.
So Deborah from the office, if she says no to the person, it's not going to feel as bad as when your friend has to say no.
Certainly. And just the dramatic reduction in terms of folks who even do that is huge. Well, so now tell me, when it comes to the rules, I don't know if this is from a TV show or a movie somewhere, but someone was hiring a nanny or a housekeeper, and they just laid it out like, I don't do dishes, I don't do laundry, I don't do cooking, I don't do diapers. And it's sort of like, okay, well, that's just got to work, isn't it? And so I think that emotional side of us in terms of a rule, that sounds like, that sounds awesome. Like that you can communicate a rule, you have some extra conviction, they understand and not to ask again. So it's got a lot going for it, but it can feel a little more scary. Now, I'm not just saying no once, I'm saying no to a potential hundreds of future requests in one fell swoop. And that's even scarier to say, Vanessa. So how do you think about the articulation of rules?
So these rules are just simple rules that you set up for yourself to increase things like your productivity, to enhance the quality of your decision making, to make your relationships better, to advance yourself in your career. These are things that all of us care about in working life. And these are all the things that we need to think about, setting small rules. It is not this rule like the nanny you were talking about, not to do the job that you were hired to do. It's about doing the job the best possible way you can. And sometimes you have to protect your time to be able to do that job. I think one of the things that we see in the workplace right now is the tyranny of the number of meetings that you're dragged into, that you don't actually have time to do what you were hired to do. And so sometimes just setting up rules around when you meet and when you work, or when you can take some time to do some deep work that needs to be done and protect that time. These are simple rules that just enhance your productivity and actually make you a more valuable member of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Now that sounds awesome. Do you actually articulate some of that stuff if you were to, say, have this conversation with a manager?
Yeah. So think about what your priorities are, what the job is, what you need to do. So one of the conceptualizations that I really love that I use in the book is this notion of what is good work. And Howard Gardner from Harvard University, he's an educational psychologist, comes up with a lovely definition of what is good work that is meaningful. Good work has three main dimensions that is kind of like a DNA strand. It is excellent, it is emotional or engaging, and it is ethical. And so when we do good work, we are essentially devoting ourselves to work that brings out the best of us, that leverages our strengths, that showcases what we bring to the table. When we do good work, it is emotionally gratifying. It feels good to do. We feel as if we've achieved something meaningful. And finally, is that it does good. Like the good, it has an ethical dimension. It makes the world better. You leave the place better than you found it. And so when you think about work, and when we think about work, if we can think about this framework of work and then try and achieve on a daily basis that sort of quality work. And in order to do that, we do need to set up these personal policies that facilitate that sort of activity.
Okay. And so to tackle the fears head on, if we fear that, oh, I'm going to be perceived as not a team player, or I'm lazy, I'm not manager or executive material because I'm not truly committed with my rules and my no's. Do you have an answer, or even better, some real data on what it's like on the receiving end?
So this is the concern for reputation. So there are two main concerns for why we say yes when we want to say no. One is we want to be liked. So one is the concern for relationships, and the other is the concern for reputation. The concern for relationships deals with the need to be liked, to be included in a social group, to have friends, to be part of something. And our reputation is the other thing that we are really concerned about. The notion that we want to be seen as competent, on the ball, a team player. Reputation is essentially what people say about us when we leave the room, and we want people to say good things. And so these are two key drivers for why we say yes when we want to say no. So your point about, oh, I'm concerned about these things that people will say, is the reputation concern. And I always say, of course, you should take on things that you can handle and that you can fit into your schedule. But I call it the house of cards trap. Essentially, if you think about every ask that comes your way, and if your goal is to be a team player and to be seen as competent, and you just keep saying yes to that stuff, you're essentially adding more and more cards to an increasingly fragile house of cards that is going to collapse at some point, essentially. And so thinking about your reputation in the short term, like if I say yes right now, they will like me, they will think I'm competent, as opposed to thinking about your reputation in the long term. If you keep taking more stuff, you're going to drop the ball. You're not going to be you're not going to be able to deliver. You're not going to be able to deliver quality. And so I always argue, is it better to say no up front because it is just something that is not in your wheelhouse or doesn't leverage your strengths, or you simply just don't have the time to do it? Say no now, or drop the ball later and have your reputation take a hit, or a bigger hit perhaps.
Okay. Well, now can you give us some example articulations of the no that is artful and it's an empowered refusal? And I say, hey, Vanessa, I would love it if you could stay late. We got this really big client presentation coming up on Friday, and I think we're behind, and there's really a lot at stake. So could you stick it out for a few hours?
That may not be the best time to say no.
Okay.
So one of the things I talk about is deciphering the ask. Like, how do you decide what to say yes to and what to say no to? If it's a high stakes, really important thing that you need to pitch in for, it may not be the best thing to say no to. But if someone asks you, hey, can you organize the retirement party because someone is retiring? That is something that is not urgent, not terribly important, and anybody can do it. That may be the thing to be saying no to.
Okay, that's good. Well, I was going to ask, in terms of, we've got our rules, how do we think about bending rules and under what circumstances?
I think they are your rules and they are meant to be bent. But if you bend them every single day, then it's not a rule.
Yeah.
Right? You need to have rules, and you need to have contingencies, and you need to have a sense of, let's say, I never work in the evenings because 6 to 8 is family time. Assume that that's my rule. But as you just said, if someone says, hey, Vanessa, can you pitch in because we have this really important thing? And can you make an exception and come just this Thursday evening because Friday is this big deadline? By all means, you can break your own rule if you choose to.
Okay. And do you recommend articulating that in a special way?
So I often talk about saying things in terms of using very absolute words. I don't, I always, I never, it's my policy. These are words that communicate that you are speaking from a place of power. So they are empowered language. They also reflect your stance on the matter. So I don't, I never. So one of the research studies that we did was compared words like I don't versus I can't. So whenever you frame a refusal, you can always say, I'm really sorry, I can't do this. Or, I'm sorry, I don't do this. So let's imagine you're at a party and someone is offering you chocolate cake. You can say, I'm sorry, I can't eat the chocolate cake. It comes across as disempowered. You're most likely going to get someone saying, why not? It's just a piece of cake. Go ahead and eat it. You're going to get the pushback. Imagine that you say, I'm sorry, I don't eat chocolate cake. No one pushes back. This is your rule. I'm not a chocolate cake eating person. It implicates the identity. And using language that implicates the identity is less likely to get pushback.
That's true. It takes an extra level of courage and curiosity to dig into that. And I think most people probably wouldn't feel comfortable saying, well, why not? But rather it's almost like you have to do more mental work to think about how I engage that conversation further if I were going to, such as, oh, that's interesting. What led you to adopt this policy?
Yeah, no, most often you don't get that conversation continuing. Most people accept a refusal when it stems from your identity because that's who you are. That's the kind of person you are, right?
I remember I was at a party and someone, there was a husband and wife, and she said, oh, Ricky doesn't drink anymore. And so I'm so full of curiosity. I was like, well, now I really want to know what happened with Ricky's historical drinking. But it's like, I'm not gonna. I just met the dude. And, he's friendly and cool. I hope, we get to maybe have that conversation later, but not the time or the place for me to dig into his history of his relationship with alcohol, though I'm so curious now. All right. So I hope Ricky's doing great. Now, you also recommend that we frame our refusal using more nouns instead of verbs. What's the thinking here?
So research shows that nouns, again, implicate your identity. When you say, I am a writer, I am a teacher, I am a mom, these are nouns. They describe your stable stance. Whereas verbs, like I write, I teach, lots of people write, lots of people teach. You are just one of them. And so verbs essentially describe an activity, whereas nouns describe who you are, again, implicating the identity. And so if you have to talk about yourself, and there's research that shows that when we talk about ourselves in terms of nouns, we come across as more authentic and like stable individuals who can communicate what they do. And so there's some work that talks about how we should talk about these things in our resumes and in job interviews by using more nouns than verbs.
Okay. And now, Vanessa, we didn't quite do a demo because you wisely mentioned, maybe this is not the time to say no. But now let's say it is the time to say no. And I'd say, hey, Vanessa, could you pick up my dry cleaning this afternoon? It looks like I'm not going to be able to make it there after all.
I'm sorry. I go to the gym every afternoon between 3 and 5.
Okay. And that's that. There's no elaboration. Yeah. Just here's that.
No is a complete sentence.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There we go. Let's try again. Vanessa, could you scan these documents and email them to me?
I believe we have someone who does those kind of things. I'm not the person.
Oh, this is fun. I could do this for a while.
Are you just going to do this all day?
Maybe I will. Vanessa, could you look over this proposal and make sure I didn't make any silly mistakes?
Sure, absolutely. I'm really good at looking at proposals, and it leverages my unique strength, and I'm happy to strengthen your proposal for you.
Okay, so that's a yes, and that's cool.
Yeah. And so when you're talking about this, the deciphering the asks, I come up with this framework where you can use this mental model to help you to figure out what you say yes to and what you say no to. So all the things you asked me, I essentially looked at them through that framework and said, what is the cost to me and what is the benefit to the other person? So there are some things that are low cost to me, but huge benefits to you. Like looking over a 2-page proposal and scanning it and making it better. That's my strength. I'm good at it. I can make it better. I know it. It's not a huge deal. I'm going to say yes because it'll benefit you. But this pick up my dry cleaning and check the weather and do this rubbish, that is stuff you shouldn't be asking anyone to do.
Okay. And do we know from the person who makes the request and they receive a no done artfully, do we have a sense in terms of their thought about you, like the relationship and the liking that we're worried about that's at risk? To what extent is that a boogeyman of our minds versus that's real?
I think we exaggerate the impact that our no's will have on others. Most often, when you say no to somebody, they simply go ahead and ask the next person. If it's something that anyone can do, they just go down the list. We do that ourselves. If someone says no to us about something, we just find somebody else to do it. We don't really think that much about it. If it's something that is meaningful and important to you, then by all means, think about taking it on after you've asked the necessary questions. Is it important? When does it need to get done? How can I contribute? Why did you ask me? Is there something unique that I can do? By asking questions, we can figure out what to say yes to. So I call these the hero's journey asks. The hero's journey asks are the ones that are high effort on our part, but hugely beneficial to others. And so we should say yes to those hero's journeys asks, because those hero's journey asks is what makes work life meaningful.
Okay. Vanessa, anything else you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things?
I have this concept in the book that most people seem to like, which is called the walnut trees. And so there are some people, despite your artful no, will not take no for an answer. And so we need to figure out how to deal with these pushy askers. And in my book, I talk about these pushy askers as walnut trees. I mean, there are several descriptors of these kind of people in the literature, pushy people, bullies, etc. But I choose to call them walnut trees, and I can tell you why. The walnut tree is essentially this big tree with a luxuriant canopy, and it has the root system that spreads out 50 feet. But what it does is that it exudes in the soil a chemical called juglone, and it stunts the growth of everything around them. And so that's why I call it. It's easier to deal with people when you can recognize walnut tree behavior and say, oh, that's walnut tree behavior, when someone's being an exceptionally pushy asker. And there are strategies that you can develop to deal with walnut trees when they are being pushy, including, like we talked about, bringing in technology, delegating the ask, etc.
Okay. Now, could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
My favorite quote, and one I say to myself almost every day, is be in demand, stay in control.
All right. And a favorite book?
I read a lot, so it's hard to choose, but my favorite book of recent time has been Lessons in Chemistry.
All right. And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
Quillbot.
And what's that too?
It's an AI writing tool.
All right. And a favorite habit?
I wake up every morning at 5:15 so that I have some alone time. I thrive on the solitude of the morning and the serenity of the morning.
Okay. And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate and they quote back to you often?
It goes the way you say.
All right. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, vpatrick23, and on Instagram, vanpat23. And my website is vanessapatrick.net.
Okay. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yes. Don't be afraid to say no. Invest in the art of empowered refusal and say no to the things that don't matter.
All right. Vanessa, this has been a treat. Thank you. And I wish you much luck and fun in all of your refusals.
Thank you. You too.
I was really digging the part from Vanessa about putting some distance between the request and your response so that you can think about it and not just let that immediate emotional, almost primordial wiring take over. Like, oh, I feel compelled to say yes. So we get some time. And with that time, we do some thinking in terms of just how important is this thing? And just how necessary is it me that does it? And then you can really feel good. Hey, you know what? I could see how this thing really makes a difference for these people. And I can see how, based on the resources available, I might be one of the best folks for the job. And it's a reasonable amount of time for that. Okay, sure. I can say yes. And then feel great about saying yes because you took the time to decode the request and really determine, yes, this is worth doing. And then you say yes and feel good about it. Or you say no and feel all the more certain that that was the prudent, wise, appropriate decision to be putting forth there. So great stuff from Vanessa. Hopefully that liberates tons of time in your life with some empowered refusals, great no's. Again, the show notes, the transcript, and the links to items that we've referenced are at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP878. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full-text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car right in your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.